Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Guys, I've been struggling with technology the past an hour, and it has annoyed the piss out of me. So we're, instead of recording this episode at 10, we're recording it at 11 because my stupid camera hasn't been working. But you know what's worse than technology not working? Divorce. And that's what we're going to talk about today in this episode of the Holy Moment Podcast. This is a podcast where we watch movies with you. We discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and of course, the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. And we're talking about a doozy today, guys. It's a sad one. But before we dive into it, let me introduce my lovely co-host, Jeffrey Nichols, who is so kind. He's so patient as I fiddle with my technology, and he waits for me as a nice human being would.
Oh, hey, shucks. It's a pleasure. That's right, folks. I'm Jeffrey Nichols. I'm excited to talk about a marriage story. Is it a marriage story or the marriage story?
I think it's just Marriage Story. I don't think it's the or the or uh.
All right. Well, marriage story then. This has been on both of our watch lists for a very long time. Talk about a pressure cooker of negative emotions. Just that whole legal proceeding that so many people go through on a yearly basis where they're pitted against this person that they've been trying to love well for however many years.
Yeah, it was, like Jeffrey said, it's been on my letterbox forever, and that's the category. So here at the podcast, we have categories. We choose movies to categories, we roll a wheel, and we watch them. And I chose the category this season for been on my letterbox forever because I have a bunch of movies that I added on like 10 years ago, and I want to get around to watching. And for me, I think this was like the fourth or fifth one. And so very excited. Jeffrey, have you seen this movie before? Or was this also, I think you said it was on your letterbox and you hadn't watched it yet?
Yeah, this was completely new to me. And what a delight. I was kind of dreading it. Not going to lie. I mean, these kinds of movies I tend to love or I want to love, right? Very low concept. But because it's low concept, it depends so heavily on execution, right? It's not an idea that immediately gets people in the seats. And it's also a subject matter that can be done very poorly. So I was very delightfully surprised by this.
I think it was with About Time, the first episode for this season. We talked a lot about low concept versus high concept. And it's something I want to get into in the podcast later on. But yeah, definitely a movie that is on paper, a couple going through a divorce, not the most enticing movie. But I know this movie was received really well. It got, I think, 6-7 nominations at the Oscars, and critics loved it. It didn't make a ton of money. I'm not terribly surprised, but it still has been received as a really well done movie.
I mean, that's the thing is, how many people are just jonesing to watch a film about divorce, right? It probably touches home to a great many people in ways that are uncomfortable. So
yeah, it's a movie truly for all the masochists out there. Yeah. I mean, speaking of for touching home with many people, I mean, this story was based off of the director's kind of real life experiences with divorce, but I'll get into it as I talk about it. So let's dive into Marriage Story. The director for this movie is Noah Baumbach. It came out on August 29th, 2019, so almost my birthday. He has directed movies like The Squid and the Whale, Frances Ha, White Noise, but also, fun fact, did you know he co-wrote Barbie and Fantastic Mr. Fox?
I did not know that. Wow. I can't say I see him all that much in those other movies.
Yeah, I won't lie. This might be the only movie I've seen that he has directed. I've seen the other two. Also, fun fact, I didn't like the other two very much. I didn't prefer Barbie or Fantastic Mr. Fox. I do think Marriage Story is really well done. I am curious if Marriage Story was a very personal story, and so maybe it's a little less like his other bodies of work, or if it's similar. I have not seen other Baumbach's movies, so talking out of ignorance here.
Like maybe if we were to watch more of his films, we'd be able to spot the DNA more in Fantastic Mr. Fox and Barbie.
Yeah, I mean, Fantastic Mr. Fox just feels so Coen-esque, and I was co-written with the Coen brothers, so that makes sense. I don't know how much of he had a hand in Barbie. I know he's credited as a writer.
Yeah, I believe Fantastic Mr. Fox was Wes Anderson, though.
Oh, Wes Anderson, you're right. I'm thinking Coen brothers from, was that last episode? No, 2 episodes ago.
No Country for Old Men.
Yes, you are so right.
I will say, I see a lot of Fantastic Mr. Fox in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is another one that you haven't seen, but I would love to see it for another episode of the podcast in the future.
And that is a Coen's brother movie.
Yes.
There we go. Slowly piecing it all together. Well, like I said, the movie didn't do great. It actually cost $18 million to make, and it only brought in in the box office, this isn't counting streaming and whatnot, $2.3 million.
I'm very interested to know how all of these costs are divvied up. right? I imagine a lot of it went to the actors. I wonder how much went into marketing because this movie, again, it is very low concept. We don't have any crazy special effects. We just have two people that are going at each other in like a legal battle, a custody battle.
Yeah, it is always interesting with these types of movies where the money goes. But when you have these bigger talents and these bigger directors, I feel like money just gets ballooned elsewhere. Not even just saying like their salaries, because I'm sure their salaries were pretty moderate. But then it's just like you have a higher production. So you're following all these guidelines and things just start taking longer than they need to. Again, I mean, 18 million isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things when it comes to Hollywood, but that's a lot of money for a movie that's mostly filmed in people's houses. But speaking of those people, we have the cast. Scarlett Johansson plays Nicole Barber, the wife. Adam Driver plays the husband, Charlie Barber. A- Ozzy Robertson plays Henry Barber. He was the son. He doesn't really have many other credited roles, and so I don't know how to pronounce his name. Laura Dern, which is a funny last name, plays the female lawyer, Nicole's lawyer. Alan Alda plays Bert, the first lawyer that Charlie gets, who we love. And then Ray Liotta plays the second lawyer, the dick lawyer, the one that's aggressive and mean in the second half of the movie that we don't love. The movie, like you said, maybe it didn't make a lot of money, but it did do well at the Oscars. Do you know which one it won?
Ooh, which one it won? It only won one?
It was not, let's see, one, two, three, four, five. It looks like it was nominated for six, I've written down, but only won one. And I'm very surprised. Very surprised by the one that it won.
Mm. Was it best acting? I know people rave about both of their performances. I think I've heard more people rave about Adam Driver, though. You know, if it won Best Supporting Actor, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the female lawyer, Nora, simply because she got more lines than a lot of the other side characters. I can't imagine Henry got it. No offense to him. He's a child actor. Um, and she did have a certain panache about her. She played that character with a lot of character. And someone felt very real, very flashy, influencer slash lawyer, doing her book tours in New York. Now, was I blown away by her? I don't know if I was blown away by her, but then again, I don't know what other supporting actors she was contending against.
I wish I could tell you were wrong. I wish I could tell you that it was Adam Driver, it was Scarlett Johansson that won Best Actor slash Actress, but it was in fact it was Laura Dern that won Best Supporting Actress. I also, like you, was like, I thought she did well. I didn't think she did a bad job. I think they did a good job with her visit. She was like weirdly unsettling to watch. Very skinny, very long. I don't know if they were going for unsettling at all, but in my opinion, I thought she was kind of unsettling to watch. She really nailed the despicable lawyer character. So like I think she did a good job in acting, but I definitely was surprised and honestly disappointed seeing that that's the only nomination that it won.
That is crazy because given how much people clearly love this film, I would think that it received far more accolades and it deserved far more accolades. Again, this is one of those situations where I don't know what other movies came out that year, and so maybe I'm just speaking out of my ass. But, um, and yeah, she did give uh, Coraline's evil mom vibes watching her. Just the way that she moved, the way that she comforted and encouraged in an insidious way, planting seeds of insecurity and selfishness.
Yeah, I do appreciate that both lawyers played almost like a devil on each of our husband and wife shoulders in the movie. And then you have Bert, the lovely lawyer, who we'll get into this a little bit later. But yeah, so it was nominated for Best Picture, makes sense. Best Actor, makes sense. Best Actress, makes sense. Best Original Screenplay and Best Original Score. Noah Baumbach actually did the screenplay, and Randy Newman did the score.
Yeah, I saw that credit. I was surprised too. I don't associate Randy Newman with because that's like you got a friend in me. That's that guy, right? Or is it his
Yeah,
cousin?
yeah, done. No, no, I think it's him. He's done a lot of Disney stuff, Toy Story, Cars. He worked with Noah Baumbach on his previous movie before this one, so that's where they first met. And I guess he liked working with them and brought him over. I wonder who approached who. I don't. I wonder if Randy Newman knew about Noah's like filmography, and was really impressed, or if Noah reached out, or if it was like a mutual Hollywood friend type thing.
Might have been a producer that got them in contact. It's like, hey, I know a guy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know the guy when it comes to music. But yeah, so I was happy to see all what it got nominated for, but what it ended up winning, I was genuinely surprised and was like, "Hmm, it was fine." But that brings us to the synopsis. Again, another one of those movies that has a simple synopsis. You got Charlie. He's cool, sophisticated, charming theater director. You got his wife, Nicole. She is a lovely, talented actress. Together, you think they'd be the perfect duo, but in actuality, they're selfish, egotistical, and they ruin each other's lives, and they get a divorce. And this movie just follows their divorce, and specifically, they have one child, and Charlie wants to stay in New York, and Nicole wants to move to LA, and so they're battling custody over this kid. And so it is kind of about a kid, but it's not like Kramer versus Kramer where it's totally about a kid, because it's still a lot about the individual parents and what they're going through in this divorce. And so it's just a very humanistic movie and a very fresh, I guess, weird way of talking about it, but a fresh approach of divorce when it comes to movies.
Yeah, because with Kramer versus Kramer, Dustin Hoffman, the story is about him getting to know his child essentially for the first time, and then coming to a point where he's truly fighting for him. Whereas here, they both clearly love their son Henry, and that's one of the driving conflicts of the movie is they're worried they're going to lose someone that they both love so much from the jump.
And I think what kind of inspired this specific lens was this movie was actually inspired by Noah's own childhood divorce. His parents, not that he was divorced as a child, but his parents were divorced, and so he's a child of divorce. And then he went through a divorce with the famous actress Jennifer Jason Leigh. And that was, I think, 3, 4 years before this movie was made. And so he talked about how it greatly influenced him. But something I want to talk about even more, because it's one thing to go through divorce and then, that obviously impacts you and the story you're going to write. But what I found interesting was apparently Noah went on record interviewing his friends who were getting divorced at the time, friends of friends who were getting divorced, divorce lawyers, mediators, children of divorce. He just was like interviewing everyone. When it comes to making movies, we're no stranger to doing research. If you're doing a period piece, you have to know the accent and the clothing and all of these things. But I don't often think of interviewing when it comes to the production of a movie. So, Jeffrey, are you surprised by the idea of like, oh, you can interview people to get their perspectives to write a script? I mean, obviously, once I say it out loud, it makes total sense. And would you ever do it for your own film, or are you like, oh, this is something that's foreign, and I never would have thought to do this to create a story?
I think it's so admirable and so beneficial to get firsthand experience, firsthand accounts of whatever it is that you are writing about. Right? Of course, you can't do that for everything, right? I can't interview any superheroes or aliens, right? If I'm given the task of writing a Marvel flick. But if I'm going to write about, say, a topic like divorce, I'm not equipped to say everything that there is to say about divorce because I've never experienced a divorce, right? And I might have some valuable things to say, being someone that is at a distance, that maybe those that have been through it are too close to see. I acknowledge that's a truth. But if I want nuance, if I want verisimilitude, authenticity, yes, I want to go to those people that have been through it. I want to pick their brains about it. I think that's a very valuable thing to do as an actor, too. If you are portraying someone that is divorced, or if you're portraying someone that has been, I don't know, locked in a basement for 12 days by a serial killer, getting some insight from someone that's experienced that, hey, like this is how I was feeling, it can be valuable.
It reminded me, I haven't thought about it in a long time until I was reading this article about Noah doing this. But one of our close friends who we went to film school with, her senior project was about a female who gets pregnant at a very young age and has to deal with the repercussions and her own coming to terms with having a kid at like 16. And it was actually based on her own story of her mother and herself. Her mom got pregnant with herself at a very young age and struggled, had to drop out of college and a lot of other things. But I remember she was telling me that she was like, yeah, I'd sit down with my mom and we'd have these and my father have these long conversations and interview her for like a few hours in the evenings to write this story to make the most authentic as it could. And so it just made me think about, is there a story out there that maybe I don't personally have. And again, like this person had an attachment to it. Noah Baumbach has an attachment to divorce, like has a personal interest in it. But are there any stories out there that you're interested in, but you're so far removed that you would have to go and interview people?
Well, I was thinking about this. I've thought about a story involving a repentant serial killer, one that has been exonerated in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the public due to uh, the use of faulty evidence in court. Um, and now he has to reckon with the fact that I did this thing. I really did. And now I have this second chance. Should I turn myself in? Should I continue living life just better? Um, and for that, I think I'd like to interview several lawyers and perhaps people that are um, on death row, although I imagine acquiring those interviews would be very difficult.
Yeah, and maybe unsettling too. I mean, obviously, I'm sure some people on death row are or uh, feel bad for what they did, but I always get creeped out by those like reels of people like last meals of serial killers. I don't know. I out of everything in this world, serial killers are one of the things I don't like. Like anytime my wife and I are looking to watch a movie and it's like a serial killer, I'm like, I prefer just not to watch this one.
Nomadland is an example of a movie that interviews its subject matter, but also kind of incorporates it into the film in a really neat way. Um, uh, so Nathaniel and I will sometimes send each other uh, questions before we start recording, just so that we can think several things through before we spit out our thoughts. And when I saw that question, I'd made that connection there with Nomadland.
Because wait, so you're saying in Nomadland, there was a lot of interviews done in research, or the movies had a lot of interviews? I don't remember the movie very well.
Oh, it's both, right? I'm sure that a lot of research was done on the front end, but I think that some of the people that ended up in the movie were people that were living the life. And so you watch those scenes and there's an unpolished quality to their acting, but there's also an authenticity to it that you wouldn't find elsewhere, um, or that you wouldn't have found if you had cast all of those characters as uh, or with highly professional and trained actors. One thing I also want to say, just this idea of writing about things that you don't know and it showing in your work makes me think of the pilot that they're shooting for her film, where they're having her hold a baby, and the guys that are clearly not fathers, haven't spent much time around kids at all, are telling her, "Hey, like, get your hand off of the head of the baby. Just hold its body." It's like, well, I have to support the head. It's like support it with the shoulder, right?
I love that nod because connecting it back to Noah, uh, again, this movie is a self reflection, probably his own kind of figuring out his own ideas of divorce, him going through it, being a child of divorce, and what his thoughts are. Because Noah is a indie filmmaker, and his ex-wife now was an actress. This movie follows an indie filmmaker director in the theater world is Charlie's character, and his wife, who's played by Scarlett Johansson, is an actress. And so I do think this movie was poking a little bit at like the film industry with that scene, and kind of like a heavy hand towards working in the film industry can kind of be sucky, and you're sometimes surrounded by morons. But I did like that.
No, it was a fantastic scene, a real peek into that world because we've both made films. Um, I haven't made any films of that caliber, right, at that level. And so seeing all of the specifically LA film folk going about their project is really cool.
Speaking of LA, it's funny because a huge part of this movie is them fighting over New York or LA, because Charlie and Nicole, they've been married for 10 years and had their kid in New York. But when they decided to get separated, she took the child to LA and got him, in the school system. The plan was for her to come back to New York, but when Charlie visits, she serves him the divorce papers in LA, making it a whole legal issue of being in LA. So you have this thing where Charlie loves New York, he wants to raise his son there, and then Nicole loves LA, she wants to raise her son there. And in my mind, I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, both those places sound horrible, and I wouldn't want to raise a family in either of those cities.
But if you had to choose, right, where would you plant your feet?
I think if I had to choose, I've always liked the fantasy of not getting married until later in life and really being a workhorse and just going and living in Seattle, New York, Tokyo, and you're just on the grind mindset. You have like friends that you get to hang out with, but I do get the beauty of a big city, the hustle and bustle. There's always something to be done to see. There's so much art, there's so much culture, there's so much food. So I like the idea of like maybe I went to school for like accounting, I don't know, law school. And then I moved to a city and I just put my head down. I wake up and instead of owning a car, I get on a subway and I take it to my job. And then I get home late at night. I eat my ramen, drink my beer. So I don't want that life, but I think it's always like a fun little fantasy of like what life could have been. And so for that reason, I would pick New York. I don't think I'd want to live in LA.
No, yeah, I'm the same way. Just with how congested LA is and how wide and sprawling, there is something magical, almost otherworldly about how just densely packed New York is, and yet it has so many things. It's not just densely packed with the same stuff.
Which I also thought was a funny ongoing joke. Because like the ongoing joke was like, Charlie, why don't you move to LA? There's so much space here. There's so much space here. New York, no, it's small. It's small. So much space in LA. Like, sure, when I think of LA, when I think of like it versus New York, I do think is more cramped, small apartments. But when I think of LA, I don't think of vast space. I think everything's super expensive and you have to live in a box just as much as you do in New York. So I just thought that was funny. Like, I don't know if that was another nod to like both cities aren't like super livable in a lot of ways. But this rambling about the cities does lead to a question. I was going to ask it later on, but you segued into it well. The cinematography and aesthetic of the two cities really represent the characters well. Nicole wants to escape from the relationship because she feels like she is stifled down. She feels like Charlie is a bit of a misogynist. She wants to be more than just his actress. She wants to direct. She wants to have her own creative goals and desires and not just be a woman in a box by him. And so she wants to go to LA to the open vastness. And when we're filming in LA, it does feel open and expansive and not claustrophobic. But then New York, Charlie, he likes his tight spaces. He likes his confined, controlled boxes, kind of like an OCD type person, wants control. When we go to New York, it might be claustrophobic, but at the same time, everything has its box. Everything has its organized piece, and that's how it's shot. Did you pick up on that in watching it, or like did that impact you as a viewer?
It did. Something else about the two cities is, yes, with LA being so wide and sprawling, it technically, quote unquote, has more space, but you are missing out on community. I hear so many people talking about their experience being in LA, how it's so isolating, and everyone's sort of in it for themselves. And we have our fair share of that in New York, I'm sure. But because everything is so densely packed, there is a greater sense of community. In fact, I feel that there are so many more people that have an almost patriotic feeling towards New York specifically, uh, than I hear about people who feel that way about LA. People will go like LA. I tried it for a few years, couldn't go back. It's awful, so expensive. I went there, I made it, and now I'm moving to Wisconsin. And then you hear about people's stories in New York, and they're like, "Yeah, it was rough. I was living in a cramped apartment. Maybe it was quote unquote a bad experience, at least materially." And they end up leaving, but uh, they think back on their time in New York. It's like I gave it a shot, right? That was the city of cities.
Yeah. That is how I also hear people talk about it. LA is kind of like a phase that they're okay being over, and New York is something they have nostalgia over that they wish they could go back to.
Charlie is more in tune with the New York communities that he's built, right? His theater company. It's a found family dynamic, whereas um, with Nicole, her actual family, her immediate family, is in LA, right? And so she doesn't have to uh, be as invested in a community outside that, although she eventually does find community outside of her family, in part through her lawyer, which is it's a really interesting and weird dynamic. And I don't really like Nora personally, but I don't think any of us are meant to.
If you walk out of this movie relating most to Nora, yeah, you're a bad person. But that segues into a question I have about a huge theme of this movie. We open up the movie with yes, they're frustrated and angry at each other in the relationship, but they've told each other, hey, we're going to work this out without lawyers. And I personally kind of believe them. They seem like level-headed people enough, and they don't have such a hatred, and the divorce isn't like on complete bitter terms that they're going to screw each other over. Now, granted, we don't know for sure, but we don't get the chance to experience that story because Nicole goes off to LA and a friend ends up telling her to get a lawyer, and she does, and it turns into a whole avalanche of kind of shitty decisions. What do you think Noah is trying to tell the audience? Do you think it's a self reflection of his own experience? Do you think it was just a plot point? Like, hey, I need there to be drama, so I'm going to insert lawyers. But, like, what do you think the point was for these characters who seemingly could have handled it themselves? And then the system comes in and ruins everything and weaponizes intimacy. It weaponizes the relationship. Everything that was either just a small spat or was actually like a good moment in the relationship, they weaponize. Like, do you think Noah was trying to make commentary like on society, or do you think it was more just a plot device? We need to interject some more drama in here.
At the beginning of the movie, they're wanting to show each other grace, and they still clearly have some measure of love and respect towards one another. Maybe not enough to stick it with that first mediator that was trying to get them to read their letters out loud, but they certainly don't want to hurt the other. And we see this process, like the divorce proceedings, um, do damage to their psyche, right? As they become more spiteful and more angry and more selfish. But they have all these voices whispering in their ears, pushing them to demand more, to take what is theirs, to indulge those selfish ideas. And I think it's a systemic issue, right? That's just how divorce proceedings go. And our legal system, it incentivizes us to be as mean and as vindictive and as hurtful as we can be to our partners, this person that we've spent so many years trying to love well. And I think the worst thing about it is how the legal system weaponizes those intimate moments, but it also weaponizes the child against both parties. Because it's hard to be kind to the other when you feel that your time with your child is in jeopardy.
It was interesting watching these two parents trying to co-parent and how it actively was hurting the child and how they both love their kid, but now they're having to traverse this new world of I just everything felt very real. It felt like you really were dropped down in the middle of the relationship, and they used to live in the same household. The child used to sleep in the bed with them, and everything was simple. And now Charlie's literally having to travel from New York to LA like every week to see his kid. And watching that turmoil slowly build in the kid was really fascinating. I like that they didn't really have any big blowout moments with the kid. You could just see he was starting to ask certain questions of like, "Hey, Dad, why aren't you around? Hey, do you love Mom? Uh, why does Mom have more toys at her house but you don't?" And all these questions are really, even if they're like at the surface, seem surface level. Of like, well, why does Mom get better candy on Halloween? Why does Mom have better toys? I feel like it's really just asking, why aren't you here? Why aren't you loving me like I thought you were going to? I don't feel safe. I don't feel like you are here for me like you're supposed to be as my father. And I like that again, they didn't play it up to like the 10th dial with the kid. It was more subtle. I think it was more accurate to what a child of divorce goes through. When you're an 8-year old, you don't say verbatim what's on your mind. Hey, father, I think it's unresponsible that you're not moving here and supporting me, even though you're going through a divorce. No, all you know is you love me and I loved you and you're gone. I don't know how to express that. And so I thought they did a really good job with the child psychology in the movie.
Yeah. And of course, the child has no frame of reference for um, just how hard his parents, both of them, are trying to be in that child's life. All he sees is, yeah, one is here and the other isn't. And when that other is here, why are we visiting all of these office buildings? This is so boring. I want to play. I want to do things that are stimulating to me personally. Meanwhile, as they're going from building to building, his father's actively trying to keep his son. But that just doesn't read to a child of that age.
I love the scene where he's dragging his kid around all of LA trying to find a divorce lawyer because this is the only time he gets with the kid. But at the same time, he has to find a lawyer, otherwise he's going to lose custody forever. And the child Henry just drops his hamburger. And he's like, "Dad, I dropped my hamburger because you're rushing me. I need another one." And the dad's like, "Oh," well," and Charlie says it, and Adam Driver delivers it in such a kind, loving, nonchalant way, like, oh, well, no worries. You can just eat mine. But you know for a fact he doesn't have the money. He's exhausted. He's flying from New York. He has to find a lawyer. He's super stressed, but at the same time, there's some level of support and a front you have to put up for that kid. And so it's interesting watching it from an adult and knowing that simple line is really just this facade of trying to keep it together for your kid. The kid doesn't see that, but we as the audience can see it, how hard he's trying.
That whole sequence was so heartbreaking and frustrating because it's another example of how the system poisoned the parties against each other, right? They're talking on the phone earlier that morning, uh, him and Nicole. And the conversation is like mostly cordial, right? It's saying, hey, you have to get this done before this date. No pressure though. Um, do it at your own pace. I understand that you're busy. He's like, yeah, I'll try to take care of that as best as I can. Later, he gets a call from Nicole's lawyer, Nora, who is drawing a much harder line in the sand and is saying, hey, you have to get this done pronto or else she gets full custody. And so that's what causes him to make his trip to LA, and they're going from office to office only to find out that all of the lawyers that he's talking to, they have already talked to as a way of preventing him from having a lawyer to represent himself. And you know that that's not Nicole's idea. You know that wasn't her intention at first. But it's just the way things go. She's being influenced, right? She's being incentivized to demand more, to be more selfish, to be a little more vindictive. And it hurts to see it happen.
And even though it's horrible, and I don't condone either lawyers that either of these people get, besides Bert, who is this old man who is trying to treat Charlie as a real human being through this divorce. But I mean, again, it's nailing down this idea. Like they're not lighthearted about it. When Charlie goes to meet the first divorce lawyer who sucks and is too expensive, but is the one he ultimately goes with, that lawyer says, "Hey, we can't not be crazy because your wife, she's going to get a crazy lawyer, and divorce lawyers, we got to be crazy to get anything done." And he's like, "No, I don't want this." So he goes to Bert, a nice, kind old man who's like, "Hey, look, I've been through divorces. It's a sucky thing, but we can do it together because we're both human." But then ultimately, the movie reveals that Bert can't hack it. He's not cynical enough. He's not ruthless enough. So it's this another idea that you have to have some type of like loss of humanity to be able to live in this world of divorce lawyers to some level, as what the story is telling us. But even though they do suck, I do think it might have been a necessity. Because even though I was saying kind of earlier on that, oh, Charlie and Nicole said they wanted to do things without lawyers and they want to be cordial, I think the issue would have been the same. Because Nicole's whole thing is, again, she's felt like she's been smothered by Charlie and not allowed to flourish. And her mind of flourishing, it's going to LA. It's where she grew up. It's what she loves. Her family's there. Her career is there as an actress. Charlie always wanted her to come back. So I think they always would have had this battle of, you need to come back to New York where your family is. And also, Charlie was in denial about them getting divorced. And so I think if they didn't get divorce lawyers, it would have just become this really messy, manipulative thing. And it was probably better. And it probably made Charlie grow up kind of being drugged through this shitty, like, uh, uh, court system.
Oh, for sure. And that's the tragedy of this is that it's all necessary. It's all here for a reason. There have to be safeguards in place that ensure that some semblance of justice is executed, right? Um, and so you have these courts of law and uh, these very strict rules that are uh, demarcating who gets what, and these are the lines that have to be met. But with how the system is designed, as necessary as it is also very destructive spiritually.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it is a good system that we have, but one I guess that weirdly worked out for them. But I think it worked out for them because they didn't let the bitterness corrode them in the long run. Yes, we have the blow up kind of two-thirds in the movie, the really famous scene where they're screaming at each other, which we'll talk about in a bit. But at the end of the day, their lawyers are like, you got to go for everything, get full custody, take all of their money, sue them, take everything that is yours. But at the end of the day, I think it's Charlie and Nicole wanting to go back to their roots and saying, wait, no, we didn't want to do it this way. We want to be reasonable people. I love this person at one point. And when we see that, Charlie doesn't pursue the money she's getting from the TV show. Nicole doesn't pursue the money he got from the grant. Uh, Nicole could have gotten more custody over Henry, but she was more like, no, I want it to be 50-50. I want my son to be with her father just as much as vice versa. So I do think there is a level of they were good. Like they needed the shitty courts to kind of make them grow up, but at the same time, they didn't completely kneel to the shittiness of the divorce lawyers in the courts that made them like even more detestable people.
It's so easy to kneel when you have all those voices in your ear that are indulging your worst instincts. And so kudos to them. But one of the things that gives us that sense of closure at the end, it's a beautiful bit of not dramatic irony. That's not what I'm looking for. But at the very beginning of the film, before they mess with the lawyers, they're in mediation. And the person they're talking to is trying to get them to uh, read out loud these letters that they've written about why they love the other. Right? It was a very vulnerable thing that they were asked to write down, and now they're being invited to read it out loud. And something the mediator says is, uh, this doesn't have to end messily. This doesn't have to lead to endless, violent, bitter conflict. As long as we all remember that this person that I'm dealing with is someone that I, at one point, loved very dearly. And at the beginning of the movie, they refuse to read. He's down to read, but she isn't. And so they storm out of the room. They're looking for a different mediator. And I like that they were discussing that together, trying to be communicative. Hey, we can choose a different mediator if you want. It's like, yeah, like we can try that out. But how the movie ends is with Charlie reading the letter that she first refused to read. And then they're both reminded that the person that they're dealing with is someone that they loved very dearly. And so it's just a nice full circle moment.
I thought it was a really nice moment. And that idea, that full circle moment, it felt very movie-esque. I will say. I'm curious if you felt this way. I didn't know a lot about this movie, but I thought it was going to be like kind of Nomadland. I thought it was going to be almost documentary kind of style, very raw, uh, almost unscripted. Now it's a raw movie, but by no means does it feel unscripted. This feels like a movie, which I loved. I love that they somehow balance these really, sorry for such a horrible description, but these really realistic humans going through this real thing, and yet it felt like a movie. It didn't feel like a kind of documentary type thing. It still felt like it had ups and downs and obstacles and tension and these great payoffs that only movies could have. And so I really enjoyed that.
It was a classically structured story. It had 3 acts, it had a climax, it had a payoff. And I was in the same boat as you. I was expecting something that was a little more artsy, I suppose, something more avant-garde. But it wasn't that. It was breaking ground, but it was also very traditional in its presentation.
Yes, I like that. Traditional in its presentation is good, and I appreciate that Noah was able to meld the two, a really humanistic, grounded, emotional story with a more traditional structure. I think the way he did that was he was very traditional in some ways, but he broke the mold. And the way he broke the mold was in these court drama, divorce, emotional romance type things. It's usually you have one person is the villain and one person is the underdog. The husband is the lying, cheating son of a bitch, and the female is down on her luck and she has to prove that the husband sucks before he takes all of her money from the book she wrote. Uh, Something like that. But I like that both had their faults, and arguably Charlie is definitely at more fault than anyone. You know, he slept with another woman, even when the marriage was on the rocks. He was still married. He was the one that was clearly a misogynist and forcing Nicole into a certain lifestyle. But Nicole isn't free from blame either. But I love it humanizes both approaches, and then we see them trying to be better or trying to work with where they're at. And so I think taking away the like, oh, he's evil or she's evil, and just being like, they're two people that made shitty choices. Arguably, it probably won't be 50-50. Someone probably made more shitty choices, but now we see them deal with them and not be horrible people within them. They made bad choices. Bad choices doesn't just now mean you make bad choices as a human forever. They're trying to do good things. And so I I really appreciate that. I feel like it grounded the movie.
For sure. I mean, both of these people, Nicole and Charlie, are people that I could see myself being friends with, right? I could get a beer with Charlie. I could get a beer with Nicole. We can talk about things, shoot the breeze, and I could see myself getting to know and really caring about them both, right? And so watching this movie, it is heartbreaking. These very real people that are so earnestly trying, and yet these divorce proceedings end up appearing at least an insuperable obstacle to them finding peace with each other again. Uh, hope gladly it doesn't come to that, but it wouldn't have been nearly as effective if one person had been villainized.
And it all has to do with that great acting, which I mean, it's funny. This is going to be my first question, but it's kind of been pushed off towards the end of the podcast, which I'm happy because I feel like this is the conversation anyone can have. But the performance, like we said at the very beginning of the episode, this is a low concept film, which just simply means it's a movie that when you describe it, the log line, the synopsis doesn't immediately get people in the theaters. It has to do with the production quality and the acting that really sells this idea. Again, two people going through a divorce. I don't know if I want to go watch that, but the acting really sells this. So Jeffrey, as an actor, I know I ask you this quite often. What was your favorite bit of acting? How did it impact you? But did you find anything in this movie that the actors did differently to ground it in a way? Because again, we've seen some great performances just 2 episodes ago with I can't remember whoever the actor who played Anton Chigurh. I think he also won an Oscar for his performance. And but I wouldn't say that was a grounded. That wasn't like a raw emotional. That felt like a character. But for these people who feel real, was there any bits of acting that you can point to that you feel like grounded them for you?
Well, in the case of Nicole, one of my favorite bits of acting from Scarlett Johansson is near the beginning when she's asking him for notes on her last performance uh, at his theater, and he's hesitant to give it because I don't know, it's not necessary anymore. She's leaving for LA and he doesn't want to cause conflict, but she insists. And so he gives those notes to her. And at the end of that interaction is very cold, very restrained. There's a lot of tension in the air. And she moves towards the hallway and he says goodnight. He's like, good night. And as soon as she turns the corner, she starts bawling heavily, right? Her face is convulsing and she's like heaving and trying to catch her breath. And that was very moving. Just the idea that she was holding in so much. There was so much that she felt she could not show him. And he was not privy to that moment. He did not know that she'd burst into tears the moment she turned that corner. All he saw was this person that he loved dearly say goodbye to him in a very cold manner, nonchalant, as if she didn't care at all.
Yeah, that's definitely a moment in the movie that I honestly forgot about until you mentioned it. But I do remember watching it and being moved when she walked away and immediately started breaking down. I really felt that. So that is a good one.
I also really liked the musical number at the end where he is at a table talking about his divorce with his pals, and you see him realize as he's speaking, oh, I'm one of those stereotypical divorced men that can't stop talking about his divorce. But I mean, if you think about it for 1 second, doesn't it make all the sense in the world, right? That that's all you'd be talking about, especially if you have a kid in the equation and then the piano starts playing a song, a tune that he knows. It's a Sondheim tune called Being Alive. And he picks up that microphone, he just starts singing. And it's a song about the give and take of love, the quote unquote pros and cons, how being with someone is such a vulnerable thing. Like you learn how to support them in ways that no one else knows how to support them, but you also learn how to hurt them in ways that no one else knows how to hurt or annoy or like push or nudge, pull. You feel that sorrow as he's singing it. He's like, I know what I'm missing, and I know that she made me feel alive, and I know that she has torn me apart, and I have to live in a world in which all of those conflicting truths are true.
That moment with the song almost felt like, in my opinion, a breaking of the fourth wall. It very much felt like Noah was writing that. Like whoever was, no, just when you're watching as the audience, you feel like the director is talking to you about their experience with love. And that's and I loved it. I love that that's how I interpreted it. Maybe that's not what Noah meant it to be. But I felt like it was because again, it was this whole movie, again, it's movie-esque, structured. But that particular scene felt even more movie-esque, very movie magical, him gonna break out in song. And to me, it just felt like a little glimpse of the director saying, peeking down the window and saying, "Hey, this is how I feel about love and divorce and the beauty and also the underbelly of it that I've at least personally seen." This says the director, and so I love that scene for it.
Yeah, and another thing I love about that scene too is it could feel cheesy, but it doesn't. It feels entirely in character because at the end of the day, Charlie is a theater kid, right? Of course, they're going to be jumping at the opportunity to sing a theater song, um, and so it's not out of place. Like he sings it, it's in character, and it's the director telling the audience directly, this is my experience as well as Charlie's, and it's so many other people's experience that have been through things similar.
I think for me, what really grounded it throughout the acting was how they portrayed the relationship. There are so many great relationships out there in film and television that you just believe. But I believe this one without any romantic chemistry. There's like age with them. And what I mean is they're going through a divorce. They're not going to be all cutesy and romantic and chemistry and flirtatious. But there's certain amount of like, I've been with this person for a decade of my life. They know me, I know them. When Charlie first meets back up with Nicole, right, the scene where she serves him the divorce papers, but before she serves him the divorce papers, he's just showing up like this man's going through a divorce and he knows it, but he shows up with such confidence, such like at ease. He comes in, they give each other a peck on the lips, and he just immediately goes to the kitchen to get the chicken out. He's at his mother-in-law's, he's been there 100 times. I love in the scenes where they just have these conversations and you can tell there's a history. I don't know if Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson are married in real life, but if they aren't, wow, kudos to them to be able to pull off history like that.
Yeah.
The way they talk to each other, the way they look at each other, the way the tension feels in the room by them being there and then releases. I love we could probably talk about it next as one of the last things. The big climactic scene that everyone knows Marriage Story for, where Charlie and Nicole get into a massive fight, and it's not I don't is it a one take? I don't know if it's a one take, but it's a really long take. And it just starts off as a civil conversation and ends with an implosion of emotion. But it ends with Charlie on the ground weeping and Nicole annoyed and frustrated, being like, "This guy is a baby. He just said he just basically he hated me and wanted to kill me and never wants to see me again. And now he's the one on the ground crying." So she's like annoyed with him. But then we see her rub his shoulder. And it doesn't feel like a random "I'm gonna rub your shoulder." It feels like this is what I've done to my husband 1,000 times when he's sick, when he's depressed, when he is going through something hard.
Yeah.
This is what I do. And for them to have that history there, even in a moment of probably like, "I hate you" in this moment, just I feel like grounded that relationship so well.
Yeah, and something that they both do so well is you can tell that they're so guarded around each other. And you can tell that it's a very painful thing to keep up these walls between them. It's a very painful thing to be so guarded um, towards this person that has been your world for, it's like 5 years, 10 years. It was like 10 years. And that scene, the big blow up, uh, that demonstrates that to a T because it begins very guarded, very polite. It's a painful politeness throughout the whole movie in their interactions. And as things escalate, uh, you see that the walls are struggling to stay put, right? They're both brimming with emotion that needs some kind of outlet. And as the other is saying something that the person on the receiving end uh, disagrees with, they almost stop listening to each other, and yet they're keeping up the facade of yeah, of course, let's entertain this, as they're raring to just get out their next barb.
I think it truly is a masterclass, that scene in particular. And for a bit of context, it's kind of entered into the third act. They just had their first like big deposition, I guess, for lack of better words, in the courtroom with their two shitty lawyers. And basically, each lawyer drags the other person through the mud. Oh, you drank once, so you're an alcoholic. Oh, you didn't buckle the seat in, so you don't care for your child's safety. So just saying horrible things. And Nicole afterwards goes to talk to Charlie and is like, whoa, maybe this gotten out of hand. This is not what I wanted. Before it goes any further, let's just take our feet off the brake, take our feet off the gas, and talk about it one on one. And so it's just him and her and his apartment, and they're just having this conversation. And it's just a masterclass in building tension, rising the stakes. And what I loved about this movie, everything was just so believable. Sometimes it feels like the director or writer is pushing for a reaction. Oh, we need to get to this emotion, so we're gonna bulldoze our way there. But this feels like everything they said made logistical sense. Of course, there's frustration under the skin. They just came from like a horrible court trying where they drug each other across the mud. But there is like okay, you were shitty to me, I was shitty to you. Let's hear each other out. But then it grows and it grows, and like you said, Jeffrey, there's boundaries. But they finally fall away. But what I love is they don't fall away in an honest way. It's not like they're screaming at each other, and the more they scream, the more honest they're getting. Oh, I'm letting down my walls, so now I'm saying what I really think of you. The scene ends with Charlie screaming in Nicole's face, saying, I hope you get in a car wreck and die, and I hope I never see you again. If it wasn't for the fact that my son needs a mother, I wish you died today. And then he drops on the ground crying. And it's just not true at all. I think a lot of things in that, and then like right before then, Charlie's going on like, oh, I could have had sex with so many beautiful women in my 20s, but I didn't because of you. And I understand the sentiment of he just was like there were hot women around, but like I don't think he actually meant that. I don't think he actually was in his 20s lamenting, oh, I have a beautiful wife. I wish I could going out having sex all the time. But it's how we get in arguments. We say maybe there's a kernel of truth, and then we say it is the full truth. This is how I've always felt. This is black and white the truth. And that's what happens in arguments because our emotions take over. So I love that it's not just a place of boundaries being broken down and they're like, we can have this honest, vulnerable truth now. It is boundaries are being broken down and we're crossing into untrue territory because that's what happens in arguments. They're not rational. You're not screaming at your soon to be ex wife because you're having a rational conversations because your emotions are coming out. And so I love that buildup of the emotions and then the cathartic payoff of they're both just hurting. They are both just hurting. You can tell Nicole is ready and needs to move on, and Charlie is kind of desperately still needs her. Has again, he is the one that needs things to be in boxes, needs something to cling on to. So it's Nicole, the one who's strong for him at the end, as he is dropped on the ground crying, and she's comforting him, even though what he just said was horrible. And so I masterclass in writing, directing, cinematography, blocking.
And I feel like oftentimes when we're in a low space mentally, oh, there will be these thoughts that we entertain that we wouldn't ever like normally entertain when we're healthy and joyful, right? They're almost intrusive thoughts where, yes, from time to time we'll have these thoughts, but they're by no means representative of who we are. And when you get to the point that Charlie was, he is so angry, so frustrated, so passionate about what is being talked about. Of course, it's in those like low moments that those same thoughts will arise. And in that heat of passion, you might be consumed by that thought and identify yourself so uh, closely to that thought, right? Maybe it was an intrusive thought before, again, in low moments that he could have been sleeping around and he didn't, right? Again, that wasn't who he was though. But now in this moment of rage, that thought, he's latching onto it again because it's another low moment. It's just heightened. And so it seems to be the only thing that is true to him when, as a matter of fact, there are many other true things about him that aren't that and even go contrary to that.
And I like just a small thing. Surely it had to be done intentionally. I like the flipping of the script of gender stereotypes. I feel like we've seen scenes like this before, where a husband or wife or male and female get into an argument, or whatever the reason, the male has to be the strong one. I love that it's Charlie is the one that loses his shit and he's the one that breaks down. And you see Nicole standing there having to take care of him. That in a relationship, it's not always just one person being strong for the other. And even though they're kind of sick of each other in this moment, she is still going to be, I will be strong for you in this moment because I have to be. And so just that was nice.
Yeah. Speaking of opposites and subversions, did you notice that before the scene where Charlie sings that very sad, heartbreaking song in the restaurant, we see Nicole singing a very cheerful song with her family, and she's surrounded by friends, by community. Charlie feels very alone. We see shots of him throughout New York by himself, smoking a cigarette in his apartment alone. She's surrounded by people, singing a happy song. He's at a restaurant singing um, about his solitude. It's just a very effective contrast.
Yeah, no, it was done really well. And again, that's why I don't think there was a villain and a hero, but I do think it is clear it's telling two different sides of the divorce, you know. And Charlie's the one who unfortunately needed Nicole, or he thought he did. But it's like I'm never gonna. I never love the idea of divorce, so I don't like the idea of saying this. But it's like they almost needed a divorce to become better people. Nicole needed to go out and be on herself, be by herself to grow, and Charlie needs this time to what it's like to not have someone who he can mold into who he wants, and realize he needs to like go out and be himself and to live by himself and be okay with it.
What this movie did so well is, as you're saying, they're both not like bad people, right? They're trying to do the best that they can. But in these situations, there's always one party that gets the short end of the stick. And Charlie happened to be the person that got the short end of that stick. In fact, I almost feel that he's more the perspective character at the end than she is, uh, because I feel like we're with him more than we are with her.
I would agree. I would agree that I think we're with him. I guess we go with her for a good chunk of like the first act, but yeah, we do spend a lot of time with them.
I wonder if that has to do with this being a movie tied to Noah Baumbach's experience. He knows what it is like to be a man in the divorce. He doesn't know quite as intimately what it is to be a woman in a divorce.
And yeah, and it could be also the perspective of like he knows what it's like for him, and maybe all that he saw from his wife was the exterior. Maybe there's a world in which he just saw that. No, not again. That is way too much analyzing it, but like maybe all he saw was the exterior of his wife doing okay, and so he's like, I don't even know what she's going through, but she seems to be doing okay. But I'm falling apart over here. How could that be? And that's kind of represented in like how can one person be quote unquote okay after the divorce while the other one's falling apart? No idea if that's the case. Well, that's everything I wanted to discuss. Is there anything I missed before we go to our holy moments?
It's one of those movies that you can talk about for a good while, but I think that we've reached a good stopping point.
Well, for my holy moment's simple. I feel like I could have picked a lot of scenes or like moments, but I decided to go big overall. And it is just the humanization of these two characters in a classically structured movie because it flipped the script. You know, I've seen classical structured movie with these character-esque movies before, or I've seen these pseudo documentaries before with these like actual almost real life humans. But I don't see very often these humanistic grounded characters in a classically structured fun movie. And for that, it had a really interesting tone and was really grounding and but also fun. It wasn't just grounding and sad and detrimental. It was sad. But yeah, that's my holy moment. That how Noah was able to walk that line.
Yeah, that's a great holy moment, Nathaniel. Um, I really did come in expecting something a little more avant-garde, and um, I like avant-garde, but there is something about a well-executed, classically structured story that just hits, and and this did that. My holy moment, I think I'm gonna pick a specific moment, and that moment would be the "Being Alive" musical number that Adam Driver sings. Just the rawness of it, and um, how the movie reframes the meaning of the song. Um, Initially, it was uh, written at the end of a play called, I think it's called Coworkers or something. And it's sung by a playboy that has never had a consistent relationship in his life. and he has been talking to his coworkers who are in relationships, and they're discussing all of the many uh, frustrations they have to suffer through in being married. But in each of these stories, they come to the conclusion that it's worth it, right? And meanwhile, he's giving them little jabs and making jokes about how he doesn't have to deal with the things that they deal with. Um, but by the end of the play, he comes to this realization that, yeah, I am alone. Maybe it is worth it. Maybe it is worth it. And so the play ends on kind of a hopeful note. Sondheim wrote that song last minute at the request of I think the producer, and he was upset that it had a happier ending. He wasn't satisfied with that as the ending of that play because he wanted it to be a little more cynical. And this movie, how it used that song, honors Sondheim's original vision, I think.
Interesting. I thought that'd be your holy moment, but I didn't know all of that background to it. So that's fascinating. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed my time with this movie. I thought it was super well crafted, a movie I could return to, and surprise me along the way.
Yeah. I'm also going to give this a strong 4, not just a 4, a strong 4, right? It could go toe to toe with some 4.1s even. Why am I not just making it a 4.1? Well, I don't know. I think there's something even greater about a solid, like a strong 4.
I do agree. Yeah, 4 is better than 4.1, 2, 3, or 4, but it's not as good as 4.5.
Yeah, it's like 4.1, 4.2. That is non-committal, right? That means that there were elements that I took issue with that keep it from being perfect. A solid, a strong 4, there's a sense of resolution there. Enough said.
It's just a respectable place. Well, very good. Well, folks, normally it's the time of the day where we spin the wheel, but we have a bit of a treat for you guys next week. Last week, when we did a little segment on Sean Walker's, he's a writer, director, filmmaker. We did a short segment reviewing his short film that's up and coming, and he actually agreed to do a full-fledged interview. So next week we'll be releasing probably about our normal to runtime, about an hour, just hanging out and chilling with Sean Walker. So if you guys do want a more of a deep dive into the indie filmmaking world, what it's like to work on short films, what it's like to go to film school, join us next week as we review that. If you have any questions that you want to ask, if you ever had questions about film school or anything like that, email us at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com. You can find our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, all the other places. Follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And my advice to you guys this week is very simple. Don't get divorced. Choose a good person. Live happily ever after. All the fun stuff. Until then, get some rest. And we will see you next week for our very first The Holy Moment podcast interview, which is very exciting. Catch you guys then.